Welcome to Valemount Votes. This is VCTV's series of one-on-one interviews with candidates for mayor, for council, for regional district area H representative, and for school district 57 Robson Valley representative. And here with me today is Peter Reimer, who is running for mayor. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you for being here. So I thought what we do before we get into the questions that we have for you is, for those who don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Peter Reimer. I've lived in Valemount for 30 years, and my wife, Pat, taught school here for just around 20 years at the elementary school. Our two children grew up here, went to school here, graduated from here, and one of them lives here, and one of them lives in Vernon.
Ah, nice. Grandchildren?
One natural, one adopted.
Right. I remember the story of the one adopted from Vietnam, I believe, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story.
And yeah, what a treasure he is.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Okay, and what do you do for a living? I'm sure people know, but let's get it out there. We don't want to make any assumptions, right?
Well, I should be retired, but I enjoy getting up in the morning and going to work, so I still manage the insurance office that I used to own.
Okay.
And I'm a notary, and I've been doing that for just over 25 years. Wow. And that's my main two kind of hats that I wear.
Great, great. Okay, before we get into our questions, then we're going to allow you, like we have all the candidates, up to 3 minutes to make some opening remarks. And you can either do it right to this camera here, or you can speak to me, whatever you feel comfortable with. So whenever you're ready, please begin.
All right. Thank you. So 4 years ago, I put my name forward for council and was elected. And I want to say thank you to all who voted for me 4 years ago and gave me the tremendous privilege of serving our community in this way, and the opportunity to learn new things. And being on council and the local committees and boards that I was appointed to has really given me a new appreciation of how many people in this community work tirelessly at making Valemount what it is today. And it's still time for me to give back and use all the resources and skills that I've acquired while operating a successful business here, by now requesting the support of the voters and allowing me to be mayor for the next 4 years and oversee the management of this community. And I'm committed to devote the time that it requires to be the mayor. And my intent would be to lead a forward-thinking team of council who, while diverse, will work harmoniously to put the best interests of the community first. I see part of my job as mayor to be one of encouraging council to keep many good policies and to put in place good policies and bylaws that would get any unnecessary regulations out of the way and give people who want to have the opportunity to build their life here and build business here, the opportunity to do that without a lot of interference from our governing structure that we have. So at times I wish the village government could do more, faster, but the fact is, you know, we do run an efficient business here, and we make sure that the money that we collect in property taxes is not spent foolishly, and that there's money in the bank for emergency and for rainy days. And government doesn't have money unless it gets that money from the taxpayer. And for the village to do more, as some people have suggested that perhaps we could do more, we have to raise taxes in order to get the money, and that's not something that any council really wants to do. It's just not really popular. So the next few years I see as being both exciting and challenging as we witness more growth and opportunity here. And I'm convinced that the new council will keep Valemount moving forward in a direction that will make it even a greater place to live and work and visit. And while we continue to make sure that our roads and water and sewer infrastructure is well maintained and able to deal with the growth, I know the new council will have housing in all its aspects as a #1 priority. And I promise to work enthusiastically and with integrity and honesty, transparency, inclusiveness, respect, courtesy, and always put Valemount first. And I look forward to the support of the voters on October 20th.
Great, thank you very much. Let's dive right in. Our first topic is on housing. As you know, it's a hot button topic for the community right now.
Yes.
There's a housing shortage happening here, affecting home buyers, affecting renters, affecting seniors. Anybody who's really looking for affordable housing is having a challenge right now. Some are going as far as calling it a crisis, a housing crisis. There's no doubt that it's a serious situation that makes it difficult for not only local people, but for those who may be coming here to work. We've heard stories about people who have been great candidates for positions coming here, checking things out and not being able to find the housing that they need and not being able to take the job. And so that's a difficult situation that needs to be dealt with. The current council has taken some action on this. You're aware that the council in the fall of 2016 struck the Affordable Housing Committee as part of one of the committees to deal with housing in terms of collecting data, strategic planning, housing, zoning bylaws, that type of thing, and is working, continues to work on those problems. We have also, about 6 months ago, Council set aside some land for an affordable housing project in principle for that. So there are some concrete steps that have been taken by this Council. We have 2 questions for you. So first of all, what do you believe is the role of municipal government in dealing with Valemount's housing issues that we have been facing and that we will continue to face? And after that, we'll talk about your ideas about housing.
All right. So what's the role of the local government? The local government, in my opinion, essentially has the role of making good policy. Okay. And I have the fortunate opportunity, I guess, to speak to this matter after Wednesday night's All Candidates Forum. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of greatly encouraged after listening to some of the candidates that are running for council that will, their priority will also be to look and examine what their role will be to deal with housing from the council perspective and see what we can do. I think, first of all, and it's maybe a little comfort, but we kind of caught up to this crisis kind of late. We never had a housing issue in Valemount for a long time.
Right.
We were always, we always had certain selection. Goodness, I remember when we moved here, there was lots were almost being given away. There was always lots of choice in terms of housing. People were coming, people were going. And so it's just been really over the last number of years as people have decided that they want to come here and stay here and be a part of this community, not move away, that we haven't had that that turnover in housing. Mm-hmm. So there's very little available. And the pressure from the anticipated glacier destination resort kind of spiked some prices. The day that was announced, prices spiked, so that increased prices. And it also created some some shortage. I don't think in my practice, my notary practice, there wasn't a lot of turnover right away based on that. So, but it just kind of caught up to us.
Right.
But we haven't had new subdivision really specifically for just having lots for sale. The new subdivision that we've had has been very specific in terms of the developer having already pre-sold his lots. That's why he subdivided that. He knew that he wasn't having to hang on to them. They would all be gone. But in terms of just somebody just doing a subdivision and having some lots on the market, that hasn't happened for a while. So these prices have gone up. What can, so what is the village's role? Short of having good policy in place and doing the best we can in terms of making ourselves competitive in terms of that, there really, from a legal point of view, there isn't very much that the village can do. We're not going to be contractors. We can't be contractors.
Right.
Can we make land available? We can work with groups that want to do development, and with the provincial government, who has offered some financing in order to develop certain projects, and see whether there's anything that can be created in terms of housing through that avenue. If that is something that happens, we haven't had anybody come to the door and say this is what we want to do. I specifically think of an incident and a thing coming out of our council meetings where Valemount Affordable Rental Society has asked for a tax exemption for a newly piece of property that was purchased. And a question arose, well, couldn't council provide a tax exemption, property tax exemption for that? The only way we can provide a tax exemption for anybody is under the permissive tax exemption bylaw. If it doesn't fit under the permissive tax exemption bylaw, we can't offer a tax exemption bylaw. So exempting property taxes without either creating a new bylaw where we do that or changing our tax, permissive tax exemption bylaw isn't possible. We don't have the tools right now. Can we develop tools? Maybe we can. We need to have a look at that. But without those tools, there really isn't very much that we can do. So have a look at our bylaws and see what we can accomplish that way.
In terms of zoning and...
I don't think zoning is necessarily the issue. We have had some applications for somebody who wanted to build a smaller secondary home on another piece of on a piece of property where there already was one house, and we looked at that and we made provisions so that that could be accomplished.
Right.
So I think we've done a lot in terms of that.
Do you see that as potentially being part of a solution? For example, there are a number of large lots in Valemount that are underutilized. Perhaps people could subdivide their lot and have a tiny home or a smaller home on that secondary portion of a lot as additional housing options?
I think if that's what people want to do, and they're comfortable with that, and they know they know what's involved long term, and they want to venture down that road, I think that's certainly something that we can do.
So you'd be open to exploring creative options then?
I'm open to exploring all kinds of creative options.
Great.
This isn't just a Valemount crisis.
No, of course not. But we live here.
But I know we live here.
Right.
And, you know, you and I both are familiar with Winnipeg. There's other bigger cities too. Mm-hmm. You know, Winnipeg used to, or Winnipeg still probably has a lot of homes that have 3 stories, right?
Right.
And, you know, even back when I was a little kid growing up there, my uncle and aunt lived on the main floor of a house. My uncle's sister and his dad lived on the 2nd floor of the house, and my 2 cousins shared, one shared the very top kind of attic place, and the other one had another bedroom. I mean,
multi-unit dwelling within a single unit.
Well, absolutely.
Right.
And a lot of older homes were built that way.
Right.
That was long before we had any issues. Mm-hmm. And then we got away from that type of building structure, and people started to want to have bigger lots and bigger single-family homes.
And square footage,
And square footage, and now we've just evolved. So in a way, we're kind of paying the price for our own kind of desires, right?
Right. The second part of this question is, what do you think council should be working on in the next 4 years to deal with the housing issues, and what specific plans? And I think you've talked about it a little bit already. Is there anything you wanted to add to that before we moved out of that topic?
Well, I think that we need to work together as a community to deal with this. I know a number of people would just like to just go at her and, you know, let's start building. But I think we need to carefully look at where we want to be as a community in 20, 30 years. We're not just going to build Valemount for a day or for a year. Mm-hmm. We need to think of probably the long-term effect that anything that we do is going to have for our children, for our grandchildren that come in, for other people. Right. So I think it's going to take a collective effort on everybody's part to work through these things and to understand what really needs to be done. I think one of the things that we really don't understand right now, I think there's uncertainty right at the moment.
Right.
We've all been anticipating some kind of firm answer that Valemount Glacier destination is going to go ahead and be a reality here. We have not had that confirmation. We've had innuendo. We've had statements saying everything is good. We don't need more investment. We have all of our funding to do this. We have all our investors. We're good. But we haven't had the definite answer that this is actually going to become reality in the near future.
Right.
That building is going to start, and people are going to be able to go up to that area.
So it's the elephant in the room, right?
It's the elephant in the room,
right.
And that creates some uncertainty. So what are we building? So when somebody comes here and says they need to move here in a hurry, they don't have time to build something, things aren't available. but are we going to build the right thing for somebody? We've had 2 spec houses built in all the time that I've lived here. One spec house was built and I think sat on the market for 6 or 7 years before it finally got sold. And I think the other spec house sat for almost 2 years. So I don't see an appetite for anybody coming here to build anything on speculation. I think there has, we've always kind of had the building to suit, building on the basis of, this is what I want, build it for me.
Right.
Rather than just somebody going and building it. And then saying, this is what I've got available. And so just to build another apartment building, for example, okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Continue.
So if somebody wanted to come along and build another apartment building, you know, they would have to crunch the numbers and say, can I afford to build this? And can I afford to, at the end of the day, pay the taxes, pay the insurance, pay the maintenance, and do everything else? And so these aren't easy answers.
Right.
And
so you think it's a community initiative? It's not just council. It has to be everybody coming together.
It has to be everybody
okay.
involved in this. It's not just something that that's going to come from a few people
right.
In an ivory tower.
Okay, great. Let's move on to our second topic, which is economic development / economic diversity. So we've been talking about, you know, homes being built, homes being sold here. New businesses are opening in town. Tourism has been continuing to be on the rise for the last number of years. However, there still seems to be much that can be done in terms of fostering growth, particularly on the industrial side or on the business side, or combinations of, you know, light industrial or value-added businesses. What would your ideas be for stimulating economic development here in Valemount, just as a general principle?
Well, within the village boundaries themselves, we don't have any industrial land right at the moment.
Right.
Our land is residential, and it's various forms of commercial. So we're kind of limited and confined by our boundaries in terms of what we actually can do within the village boundaries. So any kind of industrial, quote unquote, kind of ventures that we have is essentially going to be in the regional district land.
At the Valemount Industrial Park.
So at the Valemount Industrial Park,
possibly, yeah.
Which is owned by the community forest,
right.
Which will soon actually be divided into 2 companies, and it'll be Valemount Industrial Park Company. And that board, Valemount Community Forest Board, has done a lot in the last 4 years that I've been fortunate to be involved in it. I was appointed to that board from council. And I know that that board has gone through a lot of proposals over the last few years of looking at different options, specifically relating most of them to the some form of the forestry business in terms of byproducts and spin-off type of industry from from that. And not everything fits. But there's been significant progress there. And right now we have one new mill that's starting to operate with, you know, the cedar mill, and it's up and running, and it's creating employment. Valemount Community Forest itself still continues to create employment, and so there are jobs there.
The Stone Company, I believe, is working out at the industrial park. The Valemount Stone Company.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So while they may not be located within village boundaries, the property leases are going through the Valemount Community Forest and into our tax base indirectly that way.
Yeah.
And they're creating employment, which is from the local community as well, right?
That's correct.
And they're purchasing supplies and things for their businesses.
Yes.
So, whether it's in village boundaries or not is, somewhat of a moot point, except for the taxation side, right?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. So there is an initiative going on, and it's ongoing, and I think we'll see more of that. The things that I would personally like to see a little bit more of, and which I would like to hopefully be able to see during my lifetime yet, is that we would be able to get more of a commitment from Hydro, and actually some progress from Hydro, to make sure that we have the power available for some of these industries. Some of the industries that would have probably been able to set up here haven't necessarily been able to set up here because there's a question of
the proper servicing for them.
Can there be the servicing that they require in terms of energy to operate their business.
Right.
And we have a small window of energy available. Last year the speculation tax was put in. I chuckle a little bit about speculation. The last speculators in British Columbia that come to my mind were Phil Ghilardi and WAC, affectionately called Wacky Bennett.
And Flying Phil. Was that Flying Phil?
Well, it was, he was known as Flying Phil.
Right.
They speculated. We wouldn't have this highway if it weren't for the speculation of Flying Phil, who basically had the philosophy, let's build it and they will come.
Right.
And for some reason, that kind of philosophy has totally been turned 180 degrees. Prove to us that there's something here for you to build, and maybe we'll think about coming. It's a total reverse.
Right, right. That's kind of become the Canadian way, and I think what separates us from the Americans is they have more of that speculative kind of, let's just do it, and then people will come, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I would kind of differ slightly in that you do have something that was speculated there, and that is the Valemount Industrial Park, right? That was purchased with nothing there, with the thought that, hey, we can make something happen here, right?
Well, there was something there. There was good land there for what we...
But no industry was there. You had to go out and actively solicit and try to find people who would be a good fit for that property, right?
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
But it was it was zoned correctly,
right,
for what we needed to do, and it at least gave us the opportunity to have some industrial property.
Right, right, right. So this kind of rolls into the second half of this question, and it's about economic diversity. So what is your definition of economic diversity, and how do you see that benefiting and rolling out here in Valemount?
Well, one of the things I think that we still probably could, and I know we can use a lot of work on, is connectivity. And recently at UBCM there was something addressed in terms of connectivity and the desire to make sure that all of the rural areas in British Columbia were connected.
You're talking about internet, wireless,
in terms of
high-speed internet?
High-speed internet,
right.
And again, this mentality, and I've experienced it in the insurance business. I was fortunate, very fortunate, very blessed, And I'm going to compare this to that for a minute. Insurance companies back from about 1980, they started having a shift of thought that if they were going to be in an insurance broker's office, that they needed a certain amount of volume. And be it 100,000 or 200,000, and then it was $500,000. So you had to kind of show the insurance company that you could produce enough premium volume in order for them to justify having a contract with your office.
Right.
And for an insurance agency in a small community where you just don't have that ability to generate that kind of volume, it limits your choices of who you can contract with.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fortunate during the time that I actually owned the insurance agency, and towards the late 1990s, I was able to connect with and be part of a Lloyd's of London contract, and they pooled all of our premiums, a number of brokers across Canada. So while we were independent, our volumes were pooled to justify being in our offices. Well, that was a tremendous boost to us. And the thinking, unfortunately, with the internet service providers has been that kind of thing where if there isn't the volume of people, if there aren't the number of people,
right,
we're not going to offer that service.
Right, because we can't recoup our investment, right?
We can't recoup our investment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And yet, my argument to them is, well, yes, you may not be able to recoup your investment that you for the infrastructure that you put in through here, but you've already got your investment, because the people in the big urban centers that are buying your service also travel through here. And when they get here, you're not giving them the service that they think they've bought.
Right.
And all of a sudden they can't get, you know, for the longest time, we didn't have self-service here. Mm. You know, internet and that kind of thing slowly evolved. But if we were able to compete with the urban centers on connectivity, I think that would be a huge game changer and would help us to really diversify and have more small businesses, and
right,
and even the large ones need that. So I think that would really make a huge difference. I think connectivity is certainly one of the
right. The argument has been made in terms of economic diversity here in Valemount that at one time we were pretty much a mill town, yeah, right? And when the mill closed, you know, half the town basically left here, and now we've taken that shift over to the tourism side, which has been building up for many years, and we're starting to get more, much more spending in terms of tourism dollars here, but it's another, you know, one-horse kind of town, right? Tourism is very susceptible to fluctuations in the exchange rates, to, as we saw after 9/11, created a huge drop in the amount of travel into Canada, particularly from the American market. But so we kind of have our eggs in that basket. So do you see the strategy that you would, as mayor, prefer to go after a larger Canfor mill type operation, or whatever that industrial equivalent would be, or concentrate more on the smaller businesses that may employ 10 to 20 people, but you get 10 of those and you have the 200 people that you would have employed at a bigger operation? What do you see as more realistic and perhaps beneficial for where we are now as a community?
I think diversity for us is crucial. We've had diversity, and diversity is what has basically kept us going. Besides, yes, the Canfor was a major employer by the time it got to be Canfor. That was a big part of the economy. But we also had the road maintenance contractor here. So that was one part of the diversity. We have CN here, and that's one part of our diversity. We are on a route that is well traveled. The Highway 5 has less closure time. There isn't the challenge of the Rogers Pass and all the snow and the snow sheds. Right. So it's a preferred truck route. As a matter of fact, truckers would rather drive from the east through here rather than drive over the Rogers Pass, even though it takes about an hour longer, say from Winnipeg to Vancouver, it takes about an hour longer, but their fuel consumption is less driving through here because they don't have the grades, they don't have the traffic. And our roads are open a lot more than the number one. Mm-hmm. So because we're on that traffic route, truckers like to stop at places like A&W and Tim Hortons and Subway. We've now got those at businesses here, and truckers have more opportunity to stop at these places. Even though parking is a little bit of a challenge sometimes, but I think if we can live with that, we've got that. So there's another diversity. Our bike park, that's diversity. I was amazed a couple of years ago when shortly after the bike park opened, and I was in Prince George for a conference, and somebody said, yeah, that's a terrific bike park. It's fantastic. And they've had it in their calendar to make sure that they took time to come here to use our bike park. That's part of diversity. And that's crucial. Our Arnold Weed, some of us know him. Hopefully a lot of people know him. Right. He was president of the BC Snowmobile Federation. He was one of the driving forces behind opening up snowmobiling here. And it's still one of our diverse.
Right, through Varda.
Through Varda, who's taken a lot of that over and is doing that, and they're doing a terrific job. So that's one of our opportunities. The whitewater rafting, and the Berg Lake Trail. We have all kinds of diversity. And in the last number of years, we fill up with motorhomes. We fill about 3 RV parks here in the community with motorhomes at certain peak times of the year, on long weekends. And that's thanks partly to the fact that Europeans and people from other parts of the world, China now, and Korea somewhat, so they come over here, and they have, through the tour operators, they fly into either Calgary or they fly into Vancouver. They rent motorhomes, and they do a kind of a circuit. Right. Come up through Whistler and over the Duffy Lake Road, and I don't know whether how fast they drive on the Duffy Lake Road at times, but or whether they're used to that. Right. But they do the circuit, come up through 100 Mile or come up through the Okanagan and then come up through here, Jasper, down the Parkway, Lake Louise, Banff, Calgary, and they return their motorhome there, or they do the opposite, Calgary to Vancouver. And that's been, so they come through here because that's where the route takes them.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So
your point is that we already have a lot of diversification.
We have a lot of diversity,
right,
and we need to keep strengthening that diversity. And that's a key to our being able to be here and be not just a community that survives, but flourishes.
So we're going to move on to our next topic here, which is on air quality.
Okay.
According to BC Lung Association's 2017 State of the Air report, Valemount had the worst measured air quality in all of BC in 2016, with double the provincial average objective. Nearly double the provincial annual objective for PM 2.5 emissions, exceeding the provincial baseline of 25 micrograms per cubic meter on 72 out of 365 days. So basically almost one out of every 5 days. And in 2016, there were no wildfire-related smoke advisories issued during the summer of that year. Not like this year. We had many, and yes, as you know, last year as well. The question is, do you have a plan for addressing this important area of health concern of poor air quality for Valemount? And if so, could you provide some actions you might take to help alleviate the situation?
Well, I don't have a plan that we can generate from the village office and make work. I think part of the solution for air quality, but we have no choice of when there's a forest fire that brings smoke into here.
Sure.
For 2 years straight, and this doesn't even cover 2016, but last year the Caribou fires and this year the fires that were around here just totally filled our valley.
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing how far this smoke travels from anywhere, and somehow seems to find itself into our part of the valley. Probably our worst air quality problems happen during the winter when it's cold and people start their wood stoves up. And I guess the best answer to try to resolve some of that air quality issue that arises from wood stoves burning, especially during days when we kind of get an inversion, is for perhaps encouraging some of the providers to make a meaningful opportunity available for people that need to upgrade their wood stoves so that they will be more efficient units, right, which are being built all the time, upgrade their chimneys, and give them the opportunity to burn better and cleaner if they have to. And the reason they have to use that here, and I understand that, is because BC Hydro has a two-tier billing system,
right,
and because we have a lot of older homes that don't have the kind of insulation that some of the newer homes have, that are built more energy efficient, some of these homes have more electric heat that's pouring out through the walls, and right, so they need to use the wood heat to be able to afford.
Right, it's an economic decision.
It's an economic decision, right? So there was a program that kind of helped, but it didn't go very far.
You're talking about the rebate program, to upgrade your stove, the incentive that the regional district, I think, or the BC Lung Association has a similar program. I think it's 10 or 15% or something.
Yeah, it wasn't very much. So, you know, unfortunately for people that are on a very tight budget, that really wasn't enough for them to be able to say, yeah, I can afford to do the upgrade that I need to do in order to do this. So, perhaps a more meaningful way. And if we can find that would be one solution to it. Obviously, as we build newer homes, the newer homes are going to be more energy efficient.
Right. I believe part of the new building code calls for catalytic converters on the wood stoves for new construction as well. So.
Yeah. So I think, you know, part of that will be eliminated as you get more newer homes, but part of it also will be with the older homes, being able to find a meaningful way to do that. Switching from a wood stove to a pellet stove, that creates a lot of
they're more efficient.
They're more efficient and burn a lot cleaner without having that smoke. So I think it's just you know, every little bit that we can do to help clean that up and help people along the way to make a difference in their own lives will help. But I don't think there's a magic bullet for it.
Right. But it won't solve itself, the problem, right? So we do have to address it at some
We
point.
Still have to keep working at it.
Right.
And hopefully we'll be able to do it. I mean, even if we, you know, chop away at it bit by bit every year and make it a little bit better.
Right.
You know, I'm probably as guilty as anybody else that I like getting into a warm vehicle in the winter. So
you let it idle. That's what you're getting at.
And I let it idle till it warms up, so that I don't have to, you know, wear 3 layers of.
So maybe put on an extra sweater and.
Put on an extra sweater and yeah. So.
Well, we should all do our part. We're breathing the same air, right?
Yeah, it is exactly.
Okay, let's move on to our fourth topic, which is on leadership, communications, and transparency. So this deals with leadership and communication as it relates to the office of mayor. The position of mayor, which you're running for, requires numerous skills. For example, team building, obviously leadership, effective communication, the ability to present Valemount's issues to other levels of government, sometimes in a forceful manner, because sometimes they don't want to hear, just like BC Hydro doesn't want to hear our concerns about the 2-tier system, right? Yeah. But sometimes you have to make them hear, right? And also the willingness to listen and respond to the concerns of Valemount residents in an open and a fair and a transparent manner. So we have 2 questions on this. The first one deals with staffing, and this is with regards to the Chief Administrative Officer position. So for those who are not aware of it, the Chief Administrative Officer for the Village of Valemount, for any village, is basically the town manager, the person who manages the affairs of the village, and also manages the staff of the village, is responsible for that, and is the one liaison that council has. It's that one employee that council has to take the wishes of council through the system for that. So it's an important key position for it. In the last 4 years, there have been 7 CAOs or interim CAOs for the village, resulting in hiring and termination costs, resulting in instability in village operations as you bring new people on and they get to a certain point, and then you have to bring another new person on and get them back to that certain point. Projects that are started by one CAO may drop off the map because it's not a priority of that the second individual, or not in their skill set, perhaps. So the question is, for you, if elected as mayor, what would you do to try to curtail or stop this constant turnover in your most senior management position here with the village?
Good question. Partly, I think we need to find the right CEO. And we developed a list of what we think are good qualities of a good CAO that would be a good fit. And whether it's our community or any community, right, it would be kind of a general kind of thing. And so we're looking for quality when we want to have an administrator. And so the challenges, again, that any administrator looking to come here, the challenges that we have are, what do we have to offer somebody in terms of lifestyle? And unless the individual is single, there's both the CAO and their spouse to consider.
Right, and family.
And family. So, right, so they're going to look at that, and I think it takes an individual, takes a family that is suited to living here, that is not dependent on some of the amenities that the urban lifestyle offers, and that will make a long-term commitment to be here. Yes, it's been an issue, but I don't think it's an unresolvable issue. Some of our interims have served us well. Sure. And you know, and the latest, and we've had a good CAO, we've had good leadership, and I don't think it's an insurmountable situation. We'll just continue to find the best person that will fit into our community and work well with council and work well with staff, and have a welcoming and open village office.
Right. Do you think housing might be an issue for someone coming in?
A few years ago it probably wasn't, but that could also be. It certainly depends on the individual's situation the way it is right now, and whether or not they can, you know, first of all, whether there's any housing available when they do come that would fit within their needs, and then if there isn't, whether they have the ability to build something, and what we can do in the meantime to help them in the transition.
Right. So in the hiring process, do you go to the back page of the resume where it says hobbies and other activities and look, make sure this person's a mountain biker,
yes,
make sure they ski, make sure they hike and all those kinds of things? So,
sure.
I mean,
that makes a huge difference.
Of course it does. I mean,
yeah,
in any position, you look at what the wages are first, of course. That's you know, bread and butter kind of thing. But then you look at lifestyle, right? And what we have to offer in spades is a wonderful lifestyle. You know, as you mentioned, we don't have the amenities that a big city has, but we certainly have things that big cities doesn't have. Right?
Correct.
Right. And so, yeah, it makes it interesting. I have seen various CAOs, and I remember one that I went hiking and climbing with here. So it's a good fit if you can find somebody like that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Second question on this topic of leadership and communications is it's a two-parter. It deals with your leadership and communication style. As we mentioned, the position of mayor really requires somebody to have stronger leadership and communication styles. How would you describe your personal leadership style, and what do you plan to do if elected to effectively lead and build a strong team with the new council?
Well, my leadership style is probably best demonstrated in the fact that during the time that I owned the insurance office and subsequently, and I had two very committed staff. That's all we needed. We were able to run our business with
two staff. Wow.
With three of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we all kind of knew where we fit in. And the two staff I had, one of them just retired a year ago, just over, not quite a year ago. The other one is still actually working. And I think they probably, the first one was with me 28 years. And the other one, I think, is coming on to 28 years.
So you're easy to get along with. Is that what you're? Is that what you're kind of subtly saying there?
So I am easy to get along with.
Okay.
But I also, but neither of these ladies had insurance experience, and so I was able to guide them and encourage them to take the initiative and show them where they can learn and how they can learn to do what needed to be done. And I tried to work myself out of a job in that case and let them take more and more responsibility and leadership in their own area. So it's about developing people that have the ability to do that on their own, so I don't always have to be there.
Right.
So that's the kind of leadership style that that I have: encouragement and direction and taking initiative, getting the education courses that you have. We all need continuing education, no matter how old we are, what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Making those kind of things available, so I've tried to maintain a long-term, steady type of employment situation.
Right, create a sense of stability.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Next question is with regards to communication. So during this council's term, no formal communication policy has been developed. The town hall meetings, or as they were called, community conversations, have been stopped. One of the media outlets in Valemount, and it's not VCTV, has had trouble getting information from the current mayor. Council has not done anything to seem to make it easier for people to work with council in terms of communication. For example, and this is one of my pet peeves, and I don't know if you've heard me mention it before, if you want to be a delegate and come to speak to council, you have to do your application in writing, and it has to be in by Thursday at noon. That's the deadline for delegation applications. However, the agenda doesn't come out until Friday afternoon. So you don't know, as a delegate, if the item you're going to be speaking to is going to be voted on at that council meeting, or if it's going to be a future council meeting. For example, if you've had a topic that's run through 3 council meetings, and maybe it's a controversial topic and it continues to come up for 3 council meetings, you don't know because you have no access to the agenda. You can't see what's there. And I don't think that's a deliberate thing. I think it's just a question of staff needs time to cut off the submissions for the agenda so that they can get them out to council and do that. But it creates a little bit of a stumbling block in terms of people knowing what to speak to and when to speak to it on council. The other thing that myself and other people have mentioned is the public comments. So as you know, there's the public comment section at the end of the council meeting, and people can speak to any item that has been on that agenda for 2 minutes. The problem is, in a lot of people's minds, is if council has already discussed, debated, and voted on something, your comments at the end of the meeting, while they're valid and valued, don't really have any impact. You can comment, that was a wonderful decision, thank you for making it, or that was a terrible decision and why didn't you do it? Yep. Some communities, such as McBride, for example, move their public comments to the section right after approving the agenda, approving the minutes, and then they go right into public comments for any items that are on the agenda, just like you do at the end of the meeting. And then council has the ability to have perhaps some additional information when they get to that point where they're debating and perhaps voting on something in there. So it's just, there are a few little stumbling blocks in terms of communication that have kind of come and gone. Some of them were good, some of them maybe not so good. The question for you is, if elected as mayor, what would you do to improve the communication between mayor and council and the residents, the media, to provide a more open, fair, and transparent process that encourages participation rather than deters people or turn them away from it?
Well, Michael, thank you for bringing that up, because some of that, I wasn't aware of what Al McBride did, but I'm convinced that what we need to strive for is excellence. And part of excellence, I think, is also excellence in our communication. And if we can communicate clearly, then there's less opportunity for people to misinterpret what is being said, or to feel that they haven't been heard or whatever. So, and communication is a two-way street. And because we have 2 ears, I always think that we should listen twice as much as what we speak.
Good philosophy.
So we do need to listen. And I would like to see more meaningful community involvement. Not just an opportunity just to come and complain, but an opportunity to actually have some meaningful input. And you know, certainly my encouragement to council would be go out and talk to people about things. Take the time to really communicate and dialogue with people before you come to a council meeting and about things that are on the agenda or whatever. So I'd like to, I think if we can make improvements and do that so that in 4 years we don't have that same problem, and that we've streamlined it and made it more meaningful, made it more effective, and we're better as a community for it, I'm all for it. Let's do it.
Excellent, thank you. Let's move on to a topic of conflict of interest. So just as a little background, on May the 26th of 2015, village staff presented Policy 64 to Council, which you may or may not remember, which was an enhanced local conflict of interest policy for councils, as was recommended by the BC Solicitor General. The Local Government Management Association of BC and the Union of BC Municipalities believe that enhanced clarification of conflict of interest guidelines may be needed in light of the Schlenker BC Court of Appeals decision, called the Schlenker decision, based on 2 councillors in Salt Spring Island. You may be familiar with it. And so they have introduced a number of considerations for staff and elected officials to help them determine when elected officials may be in a conflict of interest, some of which are contrary to what is found in the community charter. Policy 64 was narrowly adopted by a 3-2 vote, with yourself and Mayor Townsend opposing. About 6 months later, on January the 12th, 2016, that Policy 64 was rescinded by the 3-1 vote, with Councillor Salt opposing, with the recommendation that the conflict of interest guidelines outlined in the community charter under Part 4, Division 6 be used as they had been in the past. So the question, after that long preamble, is, do you believe that conflict of interest guidelines that are stronger than those contained in the community charter are necessary? And if so, would you support once again putting forth a locally tailored set of conflict of interest guidelines and definitions? It's a meaty question.
Yeah, well, it is. The case of Schlenker and
Tomlinson or Torgensen, I can't remember what it was.
Torgrimson.
Torgrimson, yeah.
Yeah, actually about that one thing. Yeah, so that is actually, that is probably one of the landmark conflict of interest. And at first, you know, at first it went through 2 courts. It went to Supreme Court and then went to Court of Appeal.
Court of Appeal, yeah.
Where the Court of Appeal said, no, the Supreme Court used too narrow of a definition. And that ruling did kind of shake up a little bit of the rural communities.
To put it mildly, yes.
So, first of all, I think for the sake of uniformity, the best conflict of interest policy that a small community like ours can adopt is to adopt the one that is as universally as possible, which is what we did. I understand conflict of interest is a hard thing to grasp at times.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think one of the things that would be very beneficial for all of us in council and anybody else that's interested is to actually have some education around conflict of interest and how to effectively use it and how not to use it. So everything that isn't conflict, the main conflict is, I think, when I personally benefit from something where otherwise nobody else could.
Right.
Or
an organization that you belong to personally benefits.
Or an organization
that director of, or
that I'm a director of. Now, there was in 2000, and after this decision was made by the Court of Appeal, there was some allowance made for smaller communities and
right. I think that the guidelines that people are talking about and perhaps that were submitted in that policy 64 are there to protect you as well as the community, right? As a public servant, they're there to protect both. The decisions that I read, there was quite a few legal opinions that came out after this decision. They said, you know, in the old days, it was the monetary thing. Everybody knows, you know, you can't financially benefit, your family members can't financially benefit. That's kind of a no-brainer, we know that. But now they've gone to the next level of, and also if you're a director or on the executive of a society, you're in conflict. Now they're saying you may be in conflict if you're a member of the society, just not an actual executive member or director. You may be, because if the society if you're on the society as a member, your goal is to try to promote the society's interests in whatever way possible by electing the executive, etc. So you may be in conflict by even being a member. So what they're saying is, and I think it's very tough for a small town like this because everybody's involved in so many different organizations. So if you make it too difficult, nobody will run for anything because you can't be involved because you're going to be in conflict in the smallest level of detail, right?
Yeah. So interestingly, of course, there's another interesting one which kind of bridges. That was the one in Spell and Machine. I don't know whether you read that one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know. Well, not in detail, but I know of that one. Yeah.
And then there was another decision. So on May 4th, conflict of interest exceptions regulations, UBCM, and where the province approved regulations that will allow elected local government officials to be appointed by their local government to serve on certain society or corporate boards without risk of disqualification based on financial conflict of interest. So
how would that apply to our situation, for example?
So that basically means that if you're appointed to by council to one of the other boards or
right, so you're
committees.
On your historic society or the community forest. Or
well, I'm not on the Historic Society board, but I am on VCTV,
right,
and I'm on the community forest.
Okay.
So, so this basically gave approval so that if I'm sitting on that board, I am not considered to be in conflict of interest just because there's financial decisions being made.
Right.
Because I don't benefit from them, and it would be no more of a benefit than would be generally acceptable. And
right.
And
so what I gather from what you're saying is that it's a complicated issue, and perhaps more study is needed in terms of what we do here locally. As you say, maybe we need to bring somebody in who can guide you through the process a little bit more.
Yeah, and having said that, even if you do bring somebody in to say, you know, if there is ever a real issue, it's a court that's going to decide,
right?
Not us. I think the onus is always, though, on the individual councillor to determine, but they need the tools to be able to determine that properly and regularly.
Yeah.
And so, in order to give them those tools, we could use that education.
Okay, great.
But this was an interesting. It did go to UBCM.
Is
following
this year?
No, this was in 2016. This was following the Court of Appeal ruling on Schlenker.
Okay.
Because a lot of communities all of a sudden said, well, yeah, we're a small community,
yeah,
and
what do we do?
How does this affect us? So that came in after, and you know, so those regulations were
interesting
changed.
Okay. Let's move on to our next topic, and that is the Rainbow Crosswalk. Okay. According to Vancouver's Georgia Straight newspaper, as of June 11th of this year, there are now 42 Rainbow Crosswalks in BC. You will no doubt remember on July the 26th of 2016, Valemount Council voted against installing a Rainbow Crosswalk here, citing cost and safety concerns. We did a little bit of research in terms of costs. Prince George installed one at a budgeted cost of $6,000. However, theirs is 4 crosswalks because it's in a multi-crossing intersection. It also uses a cold fusion technology, which apparently adheres better to the asphalt. Prince Rupert installed theirs in a typical way at $1,850, and you will remember that the proponents of the Rainbow Crosswalk had volunteered to raise the funds to pay for the paint themselves and even to do the painting work themselves and the touch-up work if needed as it went along. In terms of the safety, a study conducted by the City of Edmonton showed that there had been no safety problems with the 6 Rainbow Crosswalks that they maintained there. They found the crosswalks did not decrease pedestrian safety in any way. Our research here at VCTV shows that Valemount is one of only 3 communities in BC to have voted against the installation of a Rainbow Crosswalk here, the others being Merritt and Campbell River. The question is, given that Rainbow Crosswalks are seen as a recognition that a community is considered LGBTQ2+ friendly, if elected, would you support the installation of a Rainbow Crosswalk on a public street, not a particular public street, but any public street in Valemount, and why or why not?
Okay. So, the decision is, for me, first of all, twofold. Number one, I don't particularly, it's not the cost of, the initial cost of putting in the Rainbow Crosswalk. And I'm looking at it strictly from a dollars and cents point of view and long-term maintenance, because you put something like this in, it requires long-term maintenance. So it's a dollars and cents issue in long-term, where once it's installed, it has to be maintained, and the cost to maintain it and how much that is. Right. Okay, and and so that was certainly one of my considerations. And our roads were built to facilitate traffic, not particularly to be used to paint all kinds of things that may or may not be representative in our community. And fundamentally, I know a lot of the communities have been doing that, but Michael, I hope that not painting a rainbow crosswalk is not interpreted as not having a love and concern and affection for people that have different sexual orientations than what I have or anybody has. Mm-hmm. We need to wear inclusiveness openly, honestly, and do it every day, and love people genuinely and from the heart. And that, to me, speaks a lot more than painting lines on a street. And if I thought that one, if I thought for a minute that a rainbow sidewalk would save one life, I'd paint the whole town.
Well, there are some that feel that way, and I've heard and read some local kids, anonymously, of course, posting saying that something like that gives them that physical proof that they need, or physical, maybe that's not quite the right word, but a physical representation that their diversity is accepted, right? And the contrary position to that is that if you are one of the 3 communities in British Columbia that have turned it down, people are not going to take the time to investigate why you turned it down. It has a negative connotation, and that negative connotation, I'm sorry to say, is that you're not accepting of that particular culture. You know, that's unfortunately, people don't do their homework and say, oh well, they voted on it based on cost and safety. They
right.
say, well, they're discriminating, right, or they're not accepting, or whatever the case might be. It is a very important topic to particularly the youth in the community, but also the LGBTQ2 plus community. They feel it's a strong representation that they have been marginalized, and that representation goes a long way with those individuals. I'm just stating that viewpoint because I've heard it here in town. So I don't disagree with you. I believe wholeheartedly that we have to espouse and practice inclusivity and also acceptance. That's part of being a good human being, right?
Yeah.
However, that symbol, whether it's painted lines on a piece of pavement, or it's a flag, or it's whatever, is very important. Otherwise, why would we be having pride parades and
right.
crosswalks painted all across North America, right, or the world, for that matter?
So, just to follow up on that, the fear I have is if we do that, we will see vandalism.
That's
and
a
we will see
possibility.
vandalism
Yeah.
increase.
Sure.
I mean, that's a risk.
Yeah.
Okay. So it would open the door for more of that expression, and may polarize people more. And I think we need to think carefully. Will it polarize us in a way that we don't want?
All right.
Or do we really need to look at our own hearts and say, who am I really? You know, so I think, you know, the new council will have to, again, probably consider this. And then we can deal with it again. I don't think it's a closed door.
Okay.
But,
all right.
And like I said, if I thought it would save one life, I'd paint the whole town.
Fair enough. Another topic we have, which is very topical, very timely, I guess, is the word I was looking for, is cannabis. So cannabis, retail, recreational use of cannabis becomes legal in Canada in less than 2 weeks, October the 17th. Don't think we're ready for it here, as most communities aren't ready for it across Canada, and it's been kind of dropped down the line, and Valemount and other communities are left to deal with how they're going to deal with it. Needless to say, people are scratching their heads and trying to figure out what's the best way to approach it. So there are 2 parts to this question. First of all, if elected as mayor, and this is kind of a two-part question, if I can do that. That would make it a 10-part? No. If elected as mayor, would you support and encourage entrepreneurs to start up marijuana retail outlets in the community? Or would you support only sales of recreational marijuana through BC government cannabis stores? Or are you in favor of banning the sale of recreational marijuana in Valemount outright? So what would your preference be on those 3 options, which seem to be the most options being used by communities debated about?
Well, first of all, in BC, on October 17th, all current retail outlets are going to be legal except for one. And we're only going to have one retail outlet in BC that will sell cannabis as an outlet. That's going to be in Kamloops.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else that wants to buy cannabis has to go online and buy it. That's how it. That's what we know right now.
Right.
Only one recognized outlet, and everything else is going to be purchased online. No other recognized outlets.
But that certainly won't last long.
Okay. Now
there's money to be made. That won't last long.
Okay. So we'll see how that fleshes out. Now, the problem for our communities, and the reason why some of us are behind, is because we'd been waiting for some better guidelines of how we can deal with this, and they were late in coming, so that we really didn't have an opportunity to kind of really deal with this. Some of the communities that already had retail operations were able to kind of preempt some of that and redefine their already
right.
existing bylaws surrounding that and where they wanted to do that. But so let's say you wanted to set up a retail operation here.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to apply to the liquor distribution branch and say, I want to set up a retail operation, and your application would go into the liquor distribution branch, and they would screen and monitor and background check you just as they do anybody that
wants to do a beer store.
That wants to do
right.
a liquor store,
right.
Private liquor store.
Yeah.
Once they've done that, then they send that application back to the local community where this individual wants to set up, and then that local community has to do its due diligence in terms of if it needs rezoning and if it needs public
right.
hearings and
right.
everything else like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then gauge all of that to kind of say, okay, yes, we'll support it. This is where we could have it. This is where it makes sense. And we probably have very limited kind of areas within Valemount where it actually would fit at the present time.
Right.
Because it has to be at least 500 feet from any place where kids congregate. So measure 500 feet from the schools,
right.
measure 500 feet from the playground, measure 500 feet from the ballpark, and all of those things. So you measure 500 feet from anywhere, and then you kind of say, okay, what's in there for retail? And can it fit in there? So it wouldn't take us very long to isolate where this could be set up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, as you say, it would be another business opportunity for somebody to do.
Could be.
And
yeah. It could be one of those small diversification things we were talking about. The brewery, yeah. employs maybe I don't know, 20 people, 10 people, whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
And they could be doing online sales from there, and they could be doing.
And of course,
sales.
I hope whoever it is would also, take the time to make sure that they have all the proper security measures in place.
Right. Of course.
But and having said that, I hope that this is also an opportunity for us, and that we have been talking to our young people about the use of cannabis in the same way that we talk to them about the use of alcohol and the use of
right.
Cigarettes, and
mm-hmm.
so they understand the long-term effects that this has on them if they start becoming users of this.
Right. Okay. So I'm not clear in your answer as to which of those approaches you support. Do you support if the regulations are followed and all the proper procedures are followed? Do you support retail outlet sales here in Valemount, or only through the BC, I guess it would be the Cannabis Distribution Board or whatever they're going to call it, or...
Well, right now we don't have a choice.
Ban. Right.
Right now we don't have a choice.
No, but you're at the point now where you're going to sit down and start determining. A community can choose, as many have, to not allow the licensing of it here in the village, right, or in their community. That is the choice.
Well, and if you know, if that's if at the end of the day that's where our community overwhelmingly chooses to go, then that's where our community will go. That's not just up to one individual.
So to get to that point, you would probably look at some sort of town hall or community engagement to find out? Right?
Yeah, it has to be
okay, I'm just trying to get
yeah,
your,
it has to be an engagement
this,
of the
right?
whole community.
Okay.
It can't just be a decision of one or two people that happen to be on
council.
On council.
Okay, all right, good. Second part on that is a much smaller one, and you may or may not have a comment on it. The Act calls for allowing people to have 4 plants growing on their property for personal use. It doesn't specify whether that's indoor or outdoor, although I'm presuming that if you're a frequent user, you probably want to have it indoors so you could have it growing all year round. What do you think should be the laws on cannabis growing in Valemount proper, or do you think there should be any consideration from council on growing it for personal use?
Well, we don't have a choice in terms of making any laws in terms of
well, only as it pertains to perhaps, you know, will there be odors from the plants that might be, you know...
I believe they have to be grown indoors, out of sight. I believe that's what...
Maybe out of sight, but I'm not certain about the indoor. I'd have to do more research on that.
I believe they have to be grown indoors. I may be wrong about that, but I have a feeling that that's how it's coming down, that they have to be indoors.
So you don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I suppose it's no different if it's legal than brewing beer in your home or making wine or whatever the case would be, right? As long as it's protected from children and youth and that type of thing. Okay. And the last one is a relatively short question, is on traffic congestion and parking. So the question comes to us, what are your thoughts regarding the traffic congestion and parking issues on Caris Drive? And I'm assuming they're talking about the intersection of 5th Avenue with Tim Hortons and Petro-Canada and the highway there. And the Main Street business area, and they weren't specific, but the only thing I can think they're talking about is the area around the Swiss Bakery and how some people are parking on the sides of the roads and some half on the road, half off, and the dangerous situation with people backing in and out of traffic on that particular area. What do you feel needs to be done to improve the situation, if anything, on both those areas,
Well, the areas around on Caris Drive, if we're going to make any improvements, we have to get the Ministry of Transportation involved and work with them to try to come up with a little bit of a better solution than what's there right now. If we can use some of that right-of-way or not to have an improvement of parking or whatever.
Right.
You know, it is unfortunately you know, a very congested traffic. I know I tell you, you've got to be absolutely have your eyes in every direction when you come to that corner.
I've had that experience too, yeah.
And so we need to be careful. We need to slow down a little bit. I would rather have a problem of congestion because
then no vehicle. Sure, yeah,
I
see where you're going with that.
Right?
Yeah, of course, yeah. But it is a dangerous corner.
It is dangerous.
I've had a couple, I'll give you my example. So if I come out of the Tim Hortons drive-through there and stop at the stop sign, and I want to continue down Caris Drive, I have to kind of pull out halfway because I can't see past the Valemount sign looking to the east on 5th Avenue. If somebody's coming off the highway and making that right-hand turn, they're supposed to yield. Often they don't. And the trucks come around that corner, and they often make the turn, and then they immediately turn right off there. And then there are people making the other turn onto Highway 5 the other way too. And then there are pedestrians, especially in the summertime with the bus tours. You got
and they're running back and forth taking pictures.
Yeah. And people talk about how difficult it is to navigate roundabouts. They should come and navigate that corner.
And then you make the left-hand turn off the highway onto there, and somebody walks right in front of you, and you're and somebody's behind you, and you're maybe caught in the intersection.
Coming out of the petrol can, you've got one entrance or exit, whatever it's supposed to be, which is like 5 feet from the stop sign. So they come right around the corner there, and bang, they're right there. You know. It's kind of crazy.
So unless we come up with some kind of a plan to kind of reroute the traffic so that it makes a little bit more sense, and I don't know exactly how that would be. Either make something in one way and go around that way, or say work with Ministry of Transportation, see whether there's any possibility there of
redesigning that somehow.
Redesigning that so that it
safer. Someone's going to get hurt there. It is a dangerous corner.
Yeah, it certainly is one of the problems there since Esso and Tim Hortons opened.
Right. And what about the Main Street Swiss Bakery kind of area?
Well, again, must be a popular place.
It's nice to have that problem.
And it's nice to have that problem. So, if you know, maybe you have a little bit more of an opportunity to get off the road there, and if we can kind of maybe grade and level and make a little bit more parking area, but it is challenging.
You've got the Bigfoot Trail on one side there, the railroad tracks, so you can't go any further closer to the railroad tracks, and then there's private residences on both sides of the Swiss Bakery there, so I don't know what you could possibly do. And it's so busy there in the summertime. I was talking to Councillor Blanchette, who works at the library. She says sometimes she just has to stop in the middle of the road and wait for the circus to clear there, right? So you can kind of do it. So. Again, great problem to have. These are all, you know, we're not sitting here talking about what can we do to get more people in town.
That's right.
How can we make it more safe for those people to come
That's right.
in town?
Yeah.
That's all the written questions that were submitted. I have one that's specifically for you. You're a well-established, experienced business person, as you talked about in your opening remarks. Valemount certainly faces economic challenges, such as the ones that we've discussed already, but it also faces a number of social and environmental challenges, some of which we've talked about: housing, healthcare, seniors care, youth issues, acceptance of diversity, air quality, to name a few of those. How would you as mayor work to ensure that the social and environmental changes facing Valemount in the present and future are given equal weight to the economic challenges that we deal with?
You deliberately make them that way. But let me clarify your question for a minute. Is part of your question talking about how to fund some of these things?
Not really. It's more about how to deal with them, I guess, because economic development is a very important issue, but a lot of the social and environmental issues are important to a lot of members of the community as well. So there's always a balancing act that every council has to undertake, and as mayor you have to try to give things an equal amount of weight as the leader of council. How do you see yourself dealing with that, or are you leaning more towards one area or the other?
So what we did as a council previously, and what we would do again under new council, is identify the priorities that are current, and then once we have identified those priorities and understand and are satisfied that they fit with the priorities and the needs of our community, then we balance those within ourselves. And we did establish priorities that
so this
we
is
all
like
agreed
a
on.
strategic plan that you work on?
We had our own strategic plan as a council that these are the areas that we, these are the 6 areas that we wanted to basically focus on. And so we would have to redevelop as a new council and understand each other and then work towards making sure that we keep those priorities front and center.
Right. I think that, I hope you understand where this question is coming from. As a business person and a well-established business person, you have that background, and people tend to think that because somebody is well-versed in something or something else, that they have a leaning towards one or the other. But what you're saying is that as a leader of council and as a member of council, that you'll determine those priorities together. We need to determine together. It's not something that we just say, well, here's the way it has to be. Right. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Peter, for answering the questions. As I said at the beginning, we're going to give you up to 3 minutes now to make your closing remarks, and you can, again, do that to the camera to my over my right shoulder here. All right. Or you can speak to me, whichever you like. Okay. Well, thank you, Michael, very much for doing this interview and giving us all an opportunity to share in this election process. And just like I've done all my business life, I've encouraged my staff to work together as a team, and I would encourage council to work together as a team and encourage them to work at their strengths and build an atmosphere of trust and respect, which are key to working together successfully. And I see part of my role as mayor not as one who has to have all the answers and have the only vision, but as a team leader who encourages council to be in touch with our community and bring community vision and answers to the table. And it's then my job to make certain that that the vision is implemented and works successfully. And I said 4 years ago that Valemount is not a kingdom. The mayor is not the king, and this is not about me pushing my agenda through. It's about working together as a team. And the council needs to be able to trust the mayor with following the direction that council has decided, and that trust needs to be carefully guarded and honored. And that will be my goal, to lead and encourage council to think through the issues that are brought forward and then clearly communicate that decision to the administration. So effective and transparent communication is going to be important, and this is what I've worked at all my business life. And so I'm asking for the support and for the trust and confidence of the voters this election. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'm just going to take a moment now to follow up on what you just said and make sure that people get out and vote, encourage people to get out and vote. It is our democratic right. People have fought hard for us to have it, and it's very important for you to get out there. Don't think your vote doesn't count. 1 or 2 votes can mean the difference between your candidate being elected or not. So please get out there and do it. Encourage your family and friends to vote as well, and if anyone needs a ride, please give them a ride or ask one of the candidates. I'm sure they've got people that could help you get to the polls as well. The polls are, the information on voting is, the advance voting day is Wednesday, October the 3rd. Wednesday, October the 10th, and that will be at the Village of Valemount Council Chambers from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at 735 Cranberry Lake Road. General voting day is Saturday, October the 20th, at the same hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and that will be at the usual voting place, which is Valemount Community Hall, and that is at 101 Gore Street. So, Peter Reimer, thank you very much for coming in. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it, and best of luck in the campaign. Thank you. And we will have a very interesting election. I'm sure we will. We will. Thank you.